Okay, we're in Bible study March the 14th, 2026, and we're picking up on our story. We're in Genesis chapter 4. Last week, Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden because of what they did. But God's going with them, made them some clothes, and we begin on chapter 4. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife. That's Bible way of saying, of course, that they had sex. And she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother Abel. So we got Cain and Abel, Cain the older, Abel the younger. And this will be important because throughout the entire Hebrew story, we're going to see over and over again the younger kind of usurping or having more favor over the elder, which goes counter, of course, to the culture of the time, where the elder is always supposed to get the get the first stab at everything. Down to present day. What was what they used to say about the English aristocracy? The firstborn son got the land and title. The next two, one went in the military and one became a priest. Okay, so verse 2. And again, let's see, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was the keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the ground. So we have a shepherd and a farmer. Do we have to remind ourselves, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? How many times does God say, I am Israel's shepherd, Jesus, I'm the good shepherd? Who were the first witnesses to the birth of Jesus? Shepherds. Okay. Verse 3, in the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and other fat portions. Now, the text goes out of its way to say that what Abel brought was the best, the firstborn and the fat, which is, that's good. It doesn't say that about Cain. It just says an offering of the fruit of the ground. Didn't say that it was his, best fruit or his best basket of oranges or best basket of figs or grapes or whatever. It just says an offering. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. In other words, God liked it. Or for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. And that's all we get from that. We don't, there's no explanation for why God preferred one or the other. It really doesn't matter, because what matters is what happens next. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desires for you, but you must master it. And of course, this is a kind of a Protestant trope, or a evangelical trope. Sin is crouching at the door. The devil is just hiding right around the corner to get you. It's kind of interesting the way it's put. It's like sin is outside of us, trying to get us. But we know, because we just saw the story of the garden, sin's not out there, it's in here. Now, yeah, there are temptations out there. Okay, there's all kinds of situations that could be bad for us, but we're the ones who decide yes or no. In the Roman Catholic deal, when you go to confession and you confess and you get absolved, one of the things the priest always encourages is for you to remove yourself from the environment where you might have an occasion to sin. So if you have a problem with alcohol, don't go to bars. Okay. If you have trouble with women who are too young for you, don't hang around schools. If you have problems gambling, then don't do FanDuel. No, don't gamble. So removing yourself from the occasion of sin. The sin is still inside, but one of the ways we deal with it is we remove ourselves from the environments or the temptations that may cause it harder for us to make, the kind of right decision we need to make. But what we're seeing here is this idea that, like I said, its desire is for you, but you must master. It's the sense that it's out there somewhere, which fits right in with the whole um, fundamentalist idea that there's a such thing as Satan, and Satan's trying to get you, and you have to defend yourself, and you do that, through Jesus. Nonsense, of course. It's just another way of uh, of saying, well, I'm not responsible for what really happens to me. Well, yes, we are. Yes, we are. Verse 8. So Cain said to Abel, his brother, let's go out to the field. And when they're in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him, probably, crushed his head with a rock. Um, so what do we have here? We have the sin of Adam and Eve now has moved on to the next generation, to their children. And it will continue to move on and on and on and on until, as we'll see down the road here, we get to the situation of the flood, where God actually says to God's self, I'm sick of these people. I'm going to wipe out every living thing on earth. Pretty dire.
This isn't when we have Noah then.
Yeah, but then God finds Noah and changes his mind. In other words, finding Noah saves all of us, because God was getting ready to wipe out the whole thing and start over, or maybe not even start over, because we're so bad. We're so bad. So anyway, the Lord said to Cain, verse 9, where's Abel your brother? Well, of course, God knows, just like God knew what Adam and Eve had been up to, giving us humans a chance to be honest with God. Haven't done it so far. So here's what Cain says. He said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Of course, the answer is contained in the question. Well, yes, of course you're your brother's keeper. And I know what you did, and I just gave you a chance to confess, and you didn't do it. You lied. The Lord said, what have you done? Of course, God knows exactly what has happened. The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hands. So instead of the ground producing the fruit, the harvest, no, it produces blood. So even that now is turned upside down. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. So, the curse is this: Cain will not be successful as a tiller of the land or a farmer. He's going to be in trouble. So how's he going to eat? And he's going to be a wanderer. Now, in cultures just like today, a stranger comes walking around. What's always our first response? Who are you? Suspicion. Stranger. Enemy. Not neighbor. Not friend. So God has pretty much just consigned Cain to death, because he'll be wandering around, and there's not going to be any place for him. Remember back then you had these little close-knit, family communities. Here comes some stranger. No, we don't know you. So he's done. This basically is a death sentence. Cain knows that. Cain said, verse 13, Cain said, Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me this day away from the ground, and from thy face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive, and I'll wander on the earth, and whoever finds me will slay me. And that's exactly the correct analysis of where his situation is. See, you can't go back to mom and dad. No, you killed our child. So what's going to happen? Well, God, with God, mercy is always the last word. And so here it is again. Verse 15, then the Lord said to him, not so. If anyone slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who come upon him should kill him. The mark of Cain. We don't know what that mark is. Then that's not important. What's important is that God is not going to consign Cain to death. He's going to go off and have some sort of life, yes, but it's not going to be death at God's hand. Okay. Verse 16. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Remember John Steinbeck's great book, East of Eden? If you've ever read it, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard reading because it's about people doing horrible things to each other. Well, now what happens? Well, we're going to see the continuation of the human experiment. Verse 17. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. There's, so this is Adam and Eve's grandson, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. So we got Enoch, two Enochs. So now we have what? The first city. So human beings are starting to what? We're starting to figure out how to live on this earth. And it's interesting, isn't it? The first place we decide to live as a group is a city. So there's some debate about this. Is this story supporting living in a city versus being nomadic wanderers? On the other hand, does it support being a shepherd? Okay, versus somebody, in other words, Abel, who was killed, versus living in a city with all the crime and everything in a city. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But as far as our story goes, we've gone from Adam and Eve, now we got a city. So we humans are what we're doing. We're filling up there pretty quick, like we do. And now we got a little genealogy, verse 18. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mahuhael, and Mahuhael the father of Methushael, and Methushael, or Methuselah, if you will, the father of Lamech. Now Lamech is not a good guy. Verse 19, and Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Two wives. So now for the first time we're hearing about men having more than one wife. It was actually, it's not like what we do today when everybody lives to be 1,000,000 years old, okay? It was a necessity because, as I said last time, and it's already being borne out, childbearing is very dangerous. Women die in childbirth all the time. They die young, okay? Well, for any kind of family unit to survive, we got to have kids. We got to have offspring. We got to have a bunch of kids to help either take care of the sheep or farm the land. And also, if we live to older age, as the parents, we want to be taken care of. So yes, we need more than one woman. And because pregnancy is 9 months long, we can't wait, 9 months for a child and another 9 months. So no, let's have 2 or 3 women, wives, and we can get like 3 kids every year. Okay, it becomes just a necessity in this sort of a culture in this sort of time, and we see it throughout the whole Bible. At least the Hebrew scriptures, everybody has more than one wife. Where am I? Okay, verse 19. So Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other was Zillah. Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have cattle. So this is a little etiology here, answering the question: where did where did nomads come from? Where did people who take care of livestock come from? Where do cities come from? Okay, here's where it comes from. 21. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and the pipe. So yes, where did it come from? Some people are just really really good at music. How'd that happen? Well, this is how it happens. 22. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. So where did humans get the ability to take this raw stuff in the ground and turn it into tools and things? Well, right here. So excuse me, I got my eyes itching. That was pollen. So you see this first chapter, these first couple of chapters in Genesis are answering important questions that we have about the world. Where do things come from? How do we learn how to do this? Why do we live in cities? Why do some of us like to take care of livestock? Why do some like to be shepherds? Why do some people like music? Why do some have the gift of making stuff? Okay, where did it come from? Well, this is the biblical answer where it comes from the very beginning. Okay, so remember, God sent us out of the garden, but what is God doing? Okay, we're being provided with the ability to what? To survive. Okay, even more than that, thrive. But now look at here, thing's gonna get bad here. Verse 23. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, hearken to what I say. I have slain a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70-fold. So what's happening? The single act of Cain killing Abel has now become infesting the entire culture. It's gotten worse. So now we're going to kill somebody if they just look at us wrong. All right. And so we're seeing right now, humanity is what? It's headed down that path where very shortly God is going to say, I'm done with y'all. 25. And Adam knew his wife again. She bore a son, called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. Now, we certainly don't want to get into this nonsense about if a family has the tragedy of losing a child, then, you go have another child to take that child's place. No, 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 no. You don't have one child to take the place of another. If you want to have more children, but not to replace someone that you've lost. To Seth also a son was born. He called his name Enosh. At that time, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. In other words, right now, for the first time, we're seeing what? Worship. Okay, some sort of formalized gathering where we pray to God. And so we have, and so these first four chapters of Genesis have kind of laid out the basic framework of being a human being. Okay, we've got culture. In other words, we have to have culture. Otherwise, why are we playing music? Okay, if we have the time, and if we have the space, and if we have the if we're successful enough so that some of us can be set aside as musicians, then that clearly tells us that whatever little group that we're doing okay. That not everybody has to spend, from dawn to dusk, just trying to survive. So we're doing better than just surviving. We're having kids. We're in cities. We're making music. We're making instruments so we can till the ground better. We'll probably get weapons out of them. And now we also have some sort of worship religion. Okay, so we're on our way to being, to being a people. But we're going to see here in a minute that it's not going to be what God had hoped for us. Of course, it never is. But as always, God's mercy is always the last word. We'll see it throughout the entire story. That no matter how bad we mess up, the last word from God is not, I'm done with you, but it's, I'm going to save you from yourself one more time. All right, well, next week we'll jump into chapter 5, and I'll tell you something about these genealogies. They're not the boring things that we typically think they are. While we're reading all these names, they serve a very, very important purpose in Scripture and in the times in which these books were written. All right, so see you next time. Study the Bible. It's very interesting. Peace.